Another one of our historical markers in Chillicothe, Ohio, about the history that had national implications.
Pain was interfering with Tiffany's active lifestyle. Same-day hip replacement at the Adina Orthopedic and Spine Institute got her back to the community she calls home. At Adina, we do what we love, so you can too.
Hi everybody, I'm Mike Smith, along with local historian Kevin Coleman of Intrepid Heritage Services. Kevin, this particular marker designates the site of where a bank building was once, but it led to a national crisis in the year 1819. Could you explain?
It was actually part of a national crisis, but there was competition between state chartered banks and the national bank. I believe this was the first national bank. And so the state passed a law that's saying the national bank could be taxed at like $50,000, I think, a year, which is a huge amount of money in 1819. Well, some officers for the state came in and tried to take the money, or did take the money out of the bank. It was known as the crowbar law, because they would go into the bank and crowbar into the safe if they needed to. Wow. And actually they took, there are two reports, $100,000 or $120,000 from the bank that was here, which the state said the bank owed to the state. So whole big hullabaloo. I'm not sure how it was resolved, but actually that repeated at another bank here a few decades later.
As I understand, originally there were two sites that had these banks. Chillicothe was one, and Chicago, Illinois was another one. So it's hard to believe for us today in 2025 how Chillicothe continually played an impact in our national politic and the way that we looked at things throughout our young country.
Well, I like to say Chillicothe is a Williamsburg of the West. It is the new America, the America that developed west of the mountains. And so in its early years, it was representative of the direction the nation was going. And it was the state capital. It wasn't at that time, but it still had that inertia, that significance.
Kevin, you have a book that you might refer some of our viewers to not only give them information about this 1819 banking crisis in Chillicothe, Ohio, but other items as well.
Actually, the banking crisis is a little obscure. Most people know about it only because of the sign. But that bank was in a famous building that stood on this site, where we now have hometown hibachi and such. And that was the Madeira House here. Famous tavern and inn in Chillicothe, and it served several different functions, including the bank, and eventually it burned down in the Great Fire of April 1st, 1852. Pretty big event in Chillicothe.
Yeah. And the building that's here now, when did it come on board?
Well, when the Carlisle building had its fire, stood there for like 11 years. I like to point out that on this corner, after the fire of 1852, this was an open pit for a quarter century until this was built in 1874.
Amazing.
For some reason, they just chose not to build there. That involved James Emmett of Waverly, the first millionaire of the Saddle Valley.
Another example of history in the making, even nationally speaking, that took place right here in Chillicothe, Ohio. And you can read about it on one of these Ohio historical markers that you'll find throughout the city. For our producer, Aaron Glandon, and for local historian Kevin Coleman of Intrepid Heritage Services, I'm Mike Smith for Litter Media.